And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Singularity Lab, your home for breaking stories in science, technology, and futurism. Welcome for me, my co-host today. You love him. We appreciate him. Lou, what's going down, brother?
What's shaking, Michael? How you
Dude, I'm
doing?
so excited for today's show.
Yeah, after that 9 minute behind the scenes discussion, woo! This is buckle in, buckle
Yeah,
up.
you're going to want to buckle in for this one. It's going to
And
be a great show. We're going to be discussing the metaverse. We're going to be going into digital land, crypto, like everything you could imagine coming at us from a technological perspective. What's here now, what's coming. It's going to be pretty exciting.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, so many questions about the metaverse. I mean, I really just kind of found out about it actually, Michael, through this show.
did you now?
Yeah, when we were talking, I can't remember who we were talking about it with. But you guys, it was like I think the announcement of Meta had just come out that day
Right.
and we had brushed upon it, and I was like, "What is this?" And I looked into it. I'm like, "Oh, this is Ready Player One. You know, this is the man literally giving us another universe to live in our really dungy, terrible living conditions." It's gonna be fun and it's gonna be interesting.
It's going to be
But
interesting.
I feel like, well, whatever. We'll get into it.
I'm an optimist though, so
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Welcome, awaiting angels, Simon Fly. What's going on, brother? Arlene, great to see you. Fire in the sky, amazing. Enzo, great to see you all. I'm excited for this conversation. But before we get started, we're going to pull out of our deck of logical fallacies and cognitive biases a random card, and we're gonna hit that one right now. This is called the bandwagon fallacy, Lou. The
Oh.
bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy is appealing to popularity or the fact that so many people do something as an attempted form of validation. In my world, where I come from digital marketing, this is called social proof. It's the
Mhm.
idea that because other people are interested in this, other people are engaged in it, that it's something of value that you should be interested in. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not so
Mm,
good.
that's so true. No, I get what you're saying. There's a lot of bandwagoning I'm starting to learn science, obviously in politics, and in almost every aspect of life. There's a
Almost
form of bandwagoning, right?
Absolutely. We're social creatures, right? So
Yeah.
we're always looking for validation that our beliefs, our ideas, our perspective is true in some way. So we're always looking, and this is something interesting that I find also. We were talking about philosophy and religion just a few moments ago before we got started. And, this is something that I always find interesting because people will have a very strong belief in something, but if they don't convince somebody else to believe what they believe, then they get upset, they get frustrated, they get angry, and we see this all the time in the in the UFO Twitter community. We see it all the time in religion and politics, and it's if you don't agree with me, there's something wrong with you. And so there's a lot of bandwagon going on. So thank you so much for everybody who's joining us. We got an amazing guest for you guys today. For those of you who don't know, 𝐂𝐀𝐈 has conducted over 1,200 Voices of VR podcast interviews featuring the pioneering artists, storytellers, and technologists driving the resurgence of virtual and augmented reality. He's a philosopher, oral historian, experiential journalist, helping to define the patterns of immersive storytelling, experiential design, and ultimate potential of XR. Ladies and gentlemen, 𝐂𝐀𝐈.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me back. It's great to see you again, Michael and Lou. Excited to dig into all things the virtual reality and the metaverse. And yeah,
Mm.
I do the Voices of VR. I have covered the crypto aspect, but I'm not an expert in that, but I have covered it enough to be able to talk about it a little bit. So, but I'm mostly focusing on the virtual and augmented reality and have plenty to say what my own thoughts of the future of the metaverse or where things are at and where they're going.
Well, you've really got your heartbeat on the conversation because you're constantly going to conferences, you're giving keynotes, you're speaking with people who are in this world every single day. So I guess let's kick it off here. Let's talk about the metaverse. I mean, a lot of people are having this conversation because Facebook recently just changed their name to Meta. Zuckerberg is passionate about developing a metaverse within his social media platforms. But that's really not where this whole idea of the metaverse came from, nor is it necessarily the future of the metaverse. There's a lot of direction that this could go, and I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain about that. So can you give us an idea, kind of the origin story of who came up with this idea of the metaverse? When did they come up with it? Was it science fiction? Was it philosophy? Was it tech, people in Silicon Valley? Like, where did this idea of the metaverse begin?
Well, I would take it back to, say, the mid 60s, where you start to have the beginnings of Ivan Sutherland and Tom Furness are working on different aspects of virtual and augmented reality hardware. And then you have in the continued on through the military at some point, it gets into the Jaron Lanier and the VPL and other virtual reality companies that are creating things like Dactyl Nightmare. So in that context of the kind of resurgence of from the prototype idea into the enterprise market for virtual and augmented reality, you have science fiction author Neil Stephenson, who starts to talk about in Snow Crash the metaverse, where you would be having these embodied representations within these virtual worlds. You'd be able to kind of walk around these virtual spaces as if you were in a city, and you'd be able to have the types of experiences that you would have in a virtual space, but also kind of in this mediated environment in this simulation. And I'd say probably the other big one would probably be with Ready Player One, which was mentioned here, which was all about how almost like everything in the metaverse is all about gaming. Was a big focus of Ready Player One, where everything gets gamified. And I'd say that's probably the science fiction that is motivating and inspiring Meta the most. Is a lot of their vision for the creation of their metaverse has been through the Oculus Rift technology that they bought back in 2014, but have continued to iterate from both PC VR and standalone VR, and those have now converged into a standalone headset called Oculus Quest that's now being renamed to MetaQuest. And I think the larger context also for this name shift for Facebook to Meta was that if a lot of the reporting that was happening from the whistleblowers were reporting of how a lot of the, it's called by Alex Heath of The Verge as the lost generation. So you have both teenagers as well as young adults who are no longer really on many of the different Facebook platforms, Facebook proper itself, but also Instagram. A lot of those young folks moving into things like Snapchat and TikTok as the primary social media network. And so I think the part of the context here is that Facebook missed out on the pivot from the computing shift that goes into mobile computing. They didn't have like their own phone. So everything that Facebook has existed has had to deal with the rules and the operating system, the context that's set up by Google and iOS. And so because of that, they and Microsoft as well missed that mobile revolution. So both Microsoft and Facebook have been putting billions of dollars in trying to invest into the next computing platform, which is both virtual and augmented reality. So because of that, they have been, iterating and building out the hardware. They have probably the best, Meta has the best standalone virtual reality headset. And there's other competitors like HTC and Valve, but that's more of a PC VR. And there's other standalone that's out there, but nothing is as dominant as, let's say, Meta within the Oculus Quest. So I think there's this larger, convergence of both what they're doing with actually building the technology and the gaming and building out mostly the experiences that are, these kind of interactive games that are embodied. And there's other industry verticals that I've been covering in the podcast, but that's been their primary focus. And where they've seen as kind of like a leverage point to really grow this as an ecosystem is through the gaming. So I'd say that's probably, a good, start to kind of like map out what's been happening. And part of the reason why, like I said, is not only did they miss the hardware platform, but also they've just been losing a lot of the youth. And this is one way for them to build something that has an attraction to those younger populations. If you know anybody who's, 10 to 15 years old, they've probably spent some time on Minecraft or Roblox, these virtual worlds that they've spent an incredible amount of time growing up. And so you just think about, the whole generation that's been growing up in these virtual worlds that have been out there. And with Fortnite as well. And these other, like Epic Games, they all have these different plays. And, the other aspect that's probably just worth mentioning is the cryptocurrency and the finance and the decentralized finance and
Right.
the NFTs and all that stuff as another kind of vector of folks that are interested in, the future of the next computing platform being some combination of this immersive virtual and augmented reality in these virtual worlds that are more fully embodied. You have these different qualities of presence that are distinctly different, and you have maybe new modes of economic exchange through these virtual currencies. But it's moving from an economy that's more based on goods and services and moving into the experiential economy, which I think is we've been having with video games for a long time, but more and more we're going to be moving into this experiential age that is having experiences that are mediated through these virtual technologies.
I kind of think of, COVID as sort of this black swan event, this idea that, you're going down a specific path. We have problems, but when something like COVID hits, it exacerbates those problems in such a way that it brings them to the surface. So it makes us more aware. We really had to get acclimatized to working from home. We had to start to have education be reinvented in this virtual world. To what extent do you look at, I mean, you've been in this world since 2014 covering this concept. Do you see COVID as sort of this black swan event that's going to dramatically increase the speed at which we approach a metaverse, or the speed at which VR and AR technology begins to be used by the masses?
I had been saying for a number of years that I expected this kind of immersive technologies to hit a bit of a critical mass in 2025, and then on to like 2030, 2032 is it hit the next phase, and then into the 2040s is going to be maybe to the point where it's like massively ubiquitous. It's always difficult to know how the
Right.
technology diffusion curves happen, but if you look at other technologies and look at cell phones are, or especially the smartphone that with the iPhone coming out in 2007, you already had like a number of years of people already having like a mobile device where they're communicating with other people. And so you can imagine a future where rather than looking at a tiny screen, that you have these immersive devices that when you put something on your face, you're essentially replacing everything that has a computer screen, like a computer or other things. But I don't think that it's ever going to, nothing ever really fully replaces the technology. It sort of starts to augment it. So you can imagine that we're always still going to have our phones, we're going to still have our computers, but this is giving in ways to be able to kind of embody computing, to be able to use our bodies within these computing platforms. So given that, I think that it's still, some people saw the beginning of COVID and over that year, and we're like, oh, well, nothing, VR didn't, explode during COVID time, so therefore VR is dead. But I think what you have to look at is the way that technology diffuses is kind of like in this exponential curve where it has this doubling year over year, and it's consistently being doubled year over year, but it's still slowly growing to the point where it's maybe around 5 or 10 million Oculus Quest headsets. It's difficult because we don't know any of the numbers. They don't release any of the hard numbers. The best we can go off of are some of the applications like Rec Room, as an example, saying that they have like 1 to 2 million monthly users that are in virtual reality, which is quite a lot of people.
What's Rec Room?
Rec Room is kind of like it's a social VR application that's really focused on gaming and interaction, and it's a cross-compatible experience. So you can be on Oculus Quest, you can use it on Xbox, you can use it on PlayStation 4 or PSVR or iPhone or Android. It's basically like I think of it as a competitor to Roblox, in the sense that Roblox is like 16 years old. It's been around forever. Got like 40 or 50 million, mostly younger folks on it. But Rec Room is probably it's one of the faster growing social VR networks because it is so cross-platform. But it's a kind of a way to go play games with your friends. You can kind of think of it as that, and it's kind of got this, like you're in a dorm room and you have a rec center and you have your friends and there's an economy. You have a virtual avatars. You can buy clothes. There's wearables. So a lot of the different same economic business model as say Fortnite, where a lot of that's about buying skins and virtual representations, as well as Roblox. So Rec Room is one of those social VR platforms that are out there. But what was the original question we were asking? I was on the I sort of lost my.
Great, that's a great question. No, but you brought up another question for me, which I want to ask, because one of my concerns about a Facebook metaverse and all these sorts of things is closed platforming, because the idea of the metaverse has always been open platform. But this idea of Rec Room, I didn't realize you could use Oculus and these other things to kind of have a place where you can be multi-platform. That's happening now.
Yeah, so VR chat also is another experience where a lot of people on Twitch streaming would be able to have like the virtual representation. Well, also being in these virtual worlds where people are fully embodied. And in VR chat, you can also have the ability to put trackers on your body to actually track your entire like sort of virtual representation. So you can go to dance clubs, and there's a whole rave scene that's in VR chat. And there's a whole documentary that's going to be at Sundance by Joe Hunting, called "We Met in Virtual Reality," that kind of documents from more of a cultural perspective of some of the different gatherings and stuff that's happening in VR chat. So yeah, you can have cross-platform. And just to kind of finish the loop of what I see is how things are unfolding is that technology takes time to diffuse. Like if you remember, like people having smartphones, it went pretty quickly, and it's almost like a network effect where the more people that are within a network, that Metcalfe's law says that the value of that network is you take the number of people in that network and you square it. So it's sort of like it exponentially increases with network effects the more people that are involved in it. So it happens that there's a critical mass at some point. You'll have one or two friends, or next thing you know, you have 10 friends that are hanging out in a social network, and then it creates a pressure for you to also be a part of that network. And so,
right, I remember when I was the last one because I used to be a restaurant manager, and I was the last one of 10 restaurant managers to actually get a smartphone. And literally, like, I would come into the office and my old Nokia would be on the phone, and like they would put their other smartphones like as if it was having sex with my smartphone or my Nokia dumb phone. But to your point, like, it's a joke, but to your point, there's become social pressure to adopt a technology, right? And so, we were just talking about this with the bandwagon idea. Like, the more people that you have that adopt a certain technology, like if I'm the last one who doesn't have this technology and all my friends are congregating in this Rec Room or Roblox or wherever that is, I'm more likely going to adopt at a certain point, and we're going to have kind of hit a critical mass. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that like there's like they call it the hockey stick of exponential growth, where at some point, once it goes past that point where it sort of like hits past that curve, then it starts to kind of quote unquote go viral, where it just all of a sudden it just seemingly explodes. But it's a part of in some ways a consistent growth over time, but that at some point it sort of hits that network effect where it just there's a Rogers diffusion of technology that talks about the innovators and the early adopters, and it crosses the chasm into the mainstream, into the early majority. And it's that crossing of the chasm that goes from the sort of emerging technology into like the mainstream technologies. And so VR is a technology that has, like I said, has been around since the 50s, but has the technology with all the GPUs and all the the system on the chip and the computer vision, the artificial intelligence, and everything has basically been converging over time, where VR is at the intersection of all these really interesting technologies that are also co-evolving with it, with artificial intelligence and computer vision and everything else. And it's kind of with the smartphones, with all the different technologies, with just even the OLED screens that you have, that same screens that were on your phones were what you use with the iPhone, with the original virtual reality headset. So there's a whole ecosystem that was building these smartphone covers that then all of a sudden you put it into your face with IMU and being able to move your head, and it sort of tricks you into believing that you're in another world. So the when we talk about the metaverse, they also talk about it as being, potentially hardware independent, so that it's not that you only have to be able to have access to these immersive virtual worlds through the virtual reality or augmented reality technologies. I think there are going to be other ways for people to have access to these worlds. But just because I've been focusing on VR, I feel like there's a part of the embodied presence and the active presence and the mental social presence and the emotional presence that you get from being immersed in these virtual worlds that make it qualitatively different than these previous media, which I think is part of why, the metaverse is an encompassing term to kind of talk about all the different ways in which these technologies are going to be impacting us as a society. And that's a lot of what I've been covering on my podcast for the last 7+ years.
Right. Go ahead, Lou.
I was gonna say, Jazz Shaw's like, the sort of the
He's
old
not
man
having it.
on my lawn. He's like, I'm not going to your metaverse. And I asked him the question in the chat if he likes Star Trek, and he of course answered with yes, the original original Star Trek cast, and it's essentially the holodeck. Like this is what we're essentially getting at home. Like if I was a kid, I think I would much rather want to visit the pyramids from the comfort of my home and learn about the pyramids that way than through a school book in a classroom in this very structured setting. I mean, like, I think kids need to interact with each other, and that's important, but you can still even do it through this. Like, it sounds lonesome and almost like you're losing human contact, but in a way I disagree. I think you're actually connecting humans on a different level. It's not actual touch. This is a different kind of human communication, and I love it. Like, I think the potential for this is so cool. Like, I mean, just in the book, Ready Player One, kids went to school in the metaverse.
Yeah, the
Like,
Oasis. It was called the Oasis.
Or the Oasis. Yeah. I mean, you could pay a ticket. Imagine having to pay a parking ticket instead of going in through court and waking up early in the morning. Just put on your headset and argue to the judge or whatever. Like, there's so many applications for this, man. And I don't know. Am I crazy when I say that? Do you think this is going to take away from humanity and how people interact, or do you think it's just a different form of communication?
Well, I think there's going to be affordances of the technologies where some things are going to be better, and there's still going to be some things that are going to be better to do in the so-called in real life, or co-located with reality. Connecting with nature, or going and take hikes through going to see Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon. There's going to be certain things in which that is still going to be better than what you can do virtually and simulated. But at the same time, as we have I guess with COVID, there's been a lot of ways that people can't go out and do a lot of things. And so there's been a lot of this replacement of, there's been a lot of Zoom, but Zoom is only good if you are like wanting to go listen to someone speak. And it doesn't give you that same type of agency to move your body around and just run into somebody like you would at a conference and just have a conversation. And I think that's what the virtual reality technologies allow you, is to have this autonomy and moving your body through a virtual space and to run into people and have these collisions. And so there's going to be a whole range of different types of things that may actually be better within the virtual technologies. But what I would say, going back to the pandemic, is that at this point, we don't know when the pandemic is going to be quote unquote fully over. It could be that some of these different strains of these viruses are going to be endemic, and this is just going to be our new reality that we're living in, to the point where we're not going to be able to always go back and be around lots of people in the types of situations that we have before. That's still yet to be seen. I mean, we may find a way to kind of get a lot of these variants tamped down, but with Omicron and everything else, we still at this point don't know how that's going to play out. So that is a kind of a baseline context for talking about some of these immersive technologies, is that a lot of people are already working from home. A lot of people are already taking meetings remotely. I think just even probably within Hollywood, Lou, there's a lot of ways in which that, the meetings for things have shifted into the remote context. And I know certainly within all around professions, in just the way businesses have changed to be able to work from home. But just as an example, Accenture, they hired like 100,000 people over the last year and a half or so. And they bought 60,000 virtual reality headsets in order to have their onboarding within virtual reality, within Altspace,
Wow.
to be able to have like an onboarding into like, here's the culture, here's the community. Let's have you kind of have these cocktail party type of environments for you to start to meet your coworkers in a way that they really want to kind of build up their own company culture. And they chose to do that by doing all the onboarding within virtual reality. So you have a company like Accenture that is, trying to find ways to, at the scale that they operate, onboard people and then use the immersive technologies in ways that, start to replicate the different types of social dynamics that you would only get if you were co-located in the same place. And when we think about our relationship to the earth, it's going to, change a lot of the ecological impact of not having to travel as much if you can get as good as a type of conversation as you could in virtual reality. Now, at this point, we're not at that parity. There's so much about our face and our micro expressions and being able to really have the subtle nuances of body language in that. But there's still certain contexts and certain situations where it functionally is as good, as it feels like you're hanging out with people and able to communicate at enough bandwidth. Obviously, it's not as much as in real life, but you get other things like people being able to walk around as a stick of butter or a banana. So they have ways of kind of like their avatar representation is an expression of their character in ways that you may not be able to achieve in the same way within a face-to-face gathering in real life.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And it's interesting because when we talk about the metaverse, and I think you mentioned this, I listened to your 1000th episode today, which is amazing. If you haven't checked out Voices of VR, Kent's podcast, it's amazing, and you totally should listen to episode 1000. But
congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. One of the things I found so fascinating was that this idea, like VR is a component of the metaverse, and you could actually pull it back and actually say the internet was the beginning of the metaverse. Is that accurate? Like, where do you stand there?
Well, Tony Parisi has like his number of rules about what the metaverse is, and he does say that it's a continuation of the internet, and that it's a network, and it should be open and interoperable, and that it's for everyone. A lot of the principles of the open web, I think, ideally, the metaverse that we want to live into is going to look more like the internet than it is going to look like a bunch of like closed wall garden malls. Here's the 7 rules that there's only one metaverse. It's for everyone, that nobody controls the metaverse. I think that's an important key, because you don't want to have like Meta be the only, controller of this entity. And so in order to really live into the full potential of the metaverse, you want it to have it be to some degree decentralized and interoperable, meaning that it's much more like the internet and the World Wide Web. And that instead of and Vlad Vasivich, who's one of the creators of WebGL, told me back in 2014 that the metaverse is already here. It's just in 2D and it's called the web.
Right.
So it's sort of like that open principles, hardware independent, and network in the internet. So it doesn't mean that you have to have any specific piece of hardware to get access to it. And then just like in the web, like people have accessibility, they can't see, or they can't, they are deaf. There's different ways in which that there's accessible technologies to be able to take the information that's from the DOM and to be able to translate that into a screen reader or other ways of showing that same type of information. And so I imagine the future where maybe not everybody is in a virtual reality headset, but there's an augmented reality portal, or there's your phone that could be some portal into these different virtual worlds. So there could be many different ways for you to get access to these different spaces that are I guess either a virtual space or an augmentation of an existing reality, which is a lot about what the augmented reality is going to be. They call it kind of the mirrorverse, or these digital twins, or the AR cloud. Just this concept that there's going to be the reality and then having different ways of overlaying different aspects of things on top of that reality. So Pokemon Go and Ingress are 2 games that have already taken like these big spots that are almost like these monuments or places that are sightseeing locations that are places of interest, that they've built games around these places that end up being kind of like these common spaces or these parks that are inviting people to come together, and it establishes a context for people to either play a game or connect to each other. So I imagine that there's going to be parts of the metaverse that may have the in real life component that is also tied to the physical reality, but there may be other corners of the metaverse that are completely virtual. And more about you not being tied to any physical location. And that's more about creating an entire other space that is creating other metaphors or other contexts for people to start to meet.
Right. What do you think about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lou.
No, I was going to say, isn't there room for both?
Yeah, I think there is room for both. And whether or not, I mean, some people like Niantic, as an example, they're ones who are creating a lot of the Pokemon Go. Their founder was talking a lot about how, that their vision of the metaverse is all about having things in real life and people meeting face to face and being connected to the earth. And I think there is going to be aspects of like, there's going to be some things you can only do when you're meeting together with other people, and the type of emergent types of things that you could do with people coming together that you couldn't do in the virtual space, because you can't. When you're in virtual spaces, eventually we may have haptic feedback or whatnot, but there's going to be ways that there's certain things that people are going to be able to do when they're co-located together that you're not really going to be able to do as well within the virtual space.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a role for those different types of augmented realities. So there's going to be the establishment of our physical world, and then these augmented layers on top of that, whether it's the mirrorverse, the magicverse, the air, whatever the overlay, whatever we end up calling these layers of reality. But the way that I think about it is that you're in the center of gravity of that context, and then you're overlaying specific ways of modulating that context. But still, at the end of the day, you still feel like you're in that place of that world. But in the virtual reality, you're able to do a complete context switch. So you're maybe at home, but then all of a sudden you're at work, or you're traveling, or you're in some dance club. So many different ways of you completely transporting into a completely different context that's completely independent from your existing context.
Right. What do you make of this? I mean, if we talk about this idea that we currently are in a metaverse, we're just in 2D screen metaverse. We have a lot of problems in 2D metaverse when it comes to social media and the way people interact with one another, how they respond. Jazz Shaw says there's no accountability in online relationships, or very little. It brings out the worst in too many. Do you see there being a way to solve this as we move closer? Like, is it going to be easier to empathize or have compassion for people in a virtual world, even though we are avatars, or I don't have, I'm wearing a skin? Like, do you see that as creating more or less of what we're currently seeing in the social media sphere?
Well, maybe you could bring up those pictures. There was one of the pictures that had like a set of the nested context from the Earth on down, and just bring up that graphic that I can speak to it.
This is one of the most frightening conversations I've heard in ages, but I'm glad I'm hearing it. I will be a part. Oh my God, I love it. Jazz, you're...
So
I know he's not joking either, probably.
And he's not joking. We love him.
Well, so there is a lot of ways in which that the social media has revealed lots of ways that by moving fast and breaking things, as a metaphor, let's say, to just kind of push forward with the technology without thinking about how things scale up to have the sociological impact. Well, we've certainly done that and learned the hard lessons of how misinformation or hacking our democracy or the threats to our privacy. I think there's a risk that we still have where the way that technological innovation happens in the United States is that it prioritizes the innovation above the potential harms that could be done. So we are moving kind of like at breakneck speed into a world that we don't fully understand. We don't fully understand the implications of.
Right.
But we do know that there's ways in which that the types of either misinformation or toxic information that is written down, and then it has the network effects of it being amplified. The difference about a lot of this virtual world stuff is it's all in real time. Most of it is in real time, meaning that it's people getting together and talking and interacting just like you would gather together in a space, which means that the problems around moderation become much more difficult to handle at that scale, because it then becomes a matter of, are you going to have an artificial intelligence that's listening to every single thing I say or do, and then basically kind of have a big brother dystopic reality where we don't have any freedom from having everything we say or do recorded and documented in some fashion, which is kind of the world that we're living into with these immersive technologies. And I think that's the biggest threats we have. And that's a big reason why a lot of my work has been focusing on those both ethics and privacy and human rights frameworks that are going to allow us to live into this world without having this dystopic big brother tracking everything that we're doing, because you're putting this technology on your body and you're moving around, and it's tracking what you're looking at, your physiological and biological reactions, all these different physiological markers, eye tracking technologies eventually. So it's basically going to be this machine that's collecting all this biometric and physiological data that could start to threaten aspects of our mental privacy, our right to our identity, and our right to agency. So those are the neuro rights from the Morningstar Group and the kind of the neuro rights initiative. They're trying to establish some of the fundamental rights to say we have a right to our mental privacy. So don't be tracking what is going on inside of our head and trying to capture that in some ways, or to do this contextually aware processing of all of our biometric and physiological reactions in these immersive worlds, and then don't try to model that with our identity. So you start to have these psychographic profilings of who we are based upon our actions within these worlds. And then at that point, preventing the nudging of our behaviors to the point that is undermining our rights to our intentional actions and our agency and our autonomy. And so these are like larger principles of human rights that at this point we haven't figured out how to bridge the gap between those neuro rights and creating a new, like, say, U.S. federal privacy law that is protecting those rights to those privacy.
Do you
So
see?
we're-
Do you see what's going on? Yeah.
was
Real quick, hold on,
saying,
real quick,
oh,
real quick,
yeah,
real quick,
yeah.
real quick. Do you like? Okay, so Facebook is coming out with all these ads right now on television, and they're like, if only the government would tell us what to do, we'd do it. And it's like, okay, y'all have been literally data mining for, the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. And you had no problem with no, governmental oversight before, but now you want oversight. My question to you is, to what level are the learnings up to this point when it comes to both these corporations and policymakers going to lead us to making good legislation in the future to prepare us for the metaverse? Do you see this happening, or are we still behind the 8 ball and we're never going to catch up?
Well, Thomas Metzinger is a philosopher. He talks about this in terms of the technology pacing gap, meaning that technology advances so quickly that our conceptual frameworks around that technology lags behind, on top of the ways to figure out how to kind of turn these different dials from a legislative and tech policy level to be able to rein it in. So whether that's from algorithmic bias or artificial intelligence, or the different aspects of social media and privacy. I mean, so many of these different ways that there's not a lot of good ways that we understand how these operate at scale. So we're, if you hear rhetoric from Meta saying that we want regulation, it's a bit of, I'd say, ethics washing, where they want to be able to kind of have their hands cleared from any wrongdoing because they want them to follow the laws, and the laws and the standards haven't been established yet. So they want the laws to be set so they know where the line is, so they don't have to make something and have it be retracted later. The dilemma here is that in order for the technology to work, you have to have kind of at a baseline some of this data in order to live into this new immersive world. In order to really take advantage of having this sense of embodied presence, environmental presence, and emotional presence, mental and social presence, and active presence within these virtual worlds, it has to capture some of that to even get the technology to work. The question is, to what degree is that data then being captured and then being used for a separate context to be able to psychographically profile you for the purpose of advertising? And I feel like all signs that I see is that Meta is going like headfirst into like this new biometric psychography.
Now they'll own
world.
and see, here's the thing, right? So iOS and Apple just recently shut down Facebook's ability to track their users with iOS. And you said earlier that Facebook missed the boat on hardware. So they're going hard on Oculus. They're going hard on this virtual reality, so they can own the hardware so that they can then utilize the data and capture the data and use it for advertising. I mean,
yes,
this is what they're doing, right?
Correct. That is what they're doing. They like data. If you listen to the announcements that Meta were making, it's sort of like, it feels like kind of Big Brother, kind of war is peace, ignorance is, strength, or whatever. All those things where basically it's doublespeak, where Zuckerberg will be saying things like, that there's a tax that's being put onto these developers, and the tax is a 30% cut that the iOS developers have to pay in order to get their technology onto their apps. And that's the same for like the Android as well. Well, the thing is that Meta has been using that exact same amount for their developers. And so, but what they're, I guess, arguing in the long term is that they want to bring down that cut, and they want to subsidize everything with advertising. In fact, everything that they're building right now is they're subsidizing with a lot of money. Like if you were to buy a Quest, it would cost you right now around $299, but the actual cost would be probably around $500 or $600. You're getting it marked down quite a significant amount, which means that they're kind of like overrunning all the competition, because they're dumping, they said this year they spent over $10 billion just on the research and development and subsidizing and the whole business, because there's a thing with the new platforms that if you're able to capture the network and get a critical mass of people onto that, then from there you have all these other network effects where you can do these other types of business models that they've been doing, which is the targeted advertising and ways of kind of tracking us in different ways. So I think it's sort of a dilemma where I'm a huge fan of the virtual reality technologies, but at the same time, we are kind of sleepwalking into this nightmare without having a clear path for how to really protect ourselves around the dangers of privacy and our neuro rights. Our right to mental privacy, our right to identity, and our right to agency. Those are the big aspects that I think that are under threat with this technologies. And because it's games and the games are fun, then we're kind of mortgaging our privacy and turning our head the other way. And to really come up with the laws to be able to fix it are also difficult. It's not such an easy thing. I've done interviews with like Joe Jerome, who's now actually working at Meta, but he's a privacy lawyer trying to like figure out these debates around the federal privacy law and the private right to action. And, to what degree would these be preempted? This federal law, would it preempt a state law, and how do you negotiate all these things? So it's really a complicated thing to try to like say this is the actual solution. But I think what I see right now is an approach of trying to address the human rights levels, of trying to establish the underlying principles of saying we should live in a world that has these principles that are protected. And then from there, leave it up to the legislators to figure out how to translate those principles into the laws. But as of right now, we don't have any of those laws that are protecting us. And we're kind of just, moving fast into this new reality without much protections. But if you were to be overprotective and to prevent those things, then you may stop the innovation from happening. So that's sort of the dilemma, is that you want to make it before you know how to sort of protect yourself. But by doing it too early, you may stifle the innovation, which is the fear.
Whoa, oh boy. Okay. I think it's a pipe dream. I think it's a pipe dream that if you think you're going to get any sort of peace of mind or security that this isn't being looked at or tracked or used for advertising or data collected in mind, it's already happening now.
Everywhere.
Right
here, right
it's
now.
It's happening in a 2D universe. They have the capability of looking at your email before you even send it. Like the things you write and then you delete, they can read that. The thoughts, that it's almost the reading your thoughts in a way, as close as you can without actually doing it. There's no way. I don't care what commandments you have. I don't care what laws are written. They're going to get their data. And I'm wondering, like, I don't think in the year 2200, somebody's going to be like, I got to keep my social security number safe. Like, it's not going to be a thing. I think privacy will be almost non-existent by that.
Well, I like to hope and dream of
for
the future
sure.
that it is protected. And I actually think that part of what this is where I think actually a lot of the blockchain and other discussions start to come in, because you have the existing, what they call the Web 2 world. I'm not personally a fan of the Web 2 versus Web 3, because I think there's a lot of aspects of the open web.
Can you define Web 2.0 versus Web 3.0?
Well, Web 1.0 was like HTML. Web 2.0 was when you started to do Ajax and, these more turning like Google Maps, where you would kind of move around the map and it would sort of feel like an application. So moving from more static pages into more dynamic applications is sort of a metaphor for a lot of what we have with the open web, with Facebook, Google, and all these webs. Anytime you go to a website, that's basically like the existing Web 2 technology. Web 3 is kind of a branding term that is trying to talk about the more decentralized architectures, meaning that, like, rather than having something centralized, it's more on the blockchain. It's using things like Filecoin. It's basically trying to also make a paradigm shift between the existing centralized model with Web 2. Means that Facebook has their website, you go there, and no one's really getting paid in terms of people just post their websites, post their pictures. And the exchange is that you're able to communicate with your community in exchange for different ways that you get tracked and modeled and advertising. It's all supported by advertising. So it's a free service that's supported by that advertising. Now, moving into this new model, what's the new model that's going to replace that? And I've talked to at the Decentralized Web Summit in 2018. I had a chance to do an interview with Vint Cerf, he's one of the co-inventors of the internet, and he works at Google. And I was like, he was a skeptic of all of this sort of decentralized web technology, and I was like, but I was like basically arguing, was telling Vint, I was like, look, surveillance capitalism is really bad. Like Google shouldn't do that. And he said, well, is there a better way for you to give all the world's information to everybody in the world for free? And that's sort of like, in order to, and he talked, and that's from the context where he went through the different phases where in order to be on the internet, you had to be every minute was timed, and you had to like really pay attention to what you were going to, because everything you were going to was costing you money. Well, we now live in a world with the internet where you don't have to worry about that as much, because you may have a data plan or whatnot. We have a limited amount of things you can download, but for the most part, we have this experience of the web where we just kind of like explore it, and we don't have to worry about some of those things. But that's all being sustained by these business models that may be fundamentally immoral. So what's the thing that comes after that? And I think that's the big question that at this point, we don't really have a clear answer for how the existing infrastructure and how we do things is going to be replaced by this new decentralized vision that a lot of the folks are talking about, that are more of like these incentive structures. I think is a lot of what you hear about. Filecoin is a good example. Like if you want to host something and have it persistent, is there a way for you to host it and buy a bunch of hard drives that then you get paid through a Filecoin cryptocurrency that then you could translate back into money based upon how many people are getting access to those files that you're providing, which, it changes a lot of the different dynamics that otherwise means that if you want to have something on the internet, you have to pay for it yourself. And then once you die or go away, then that basically disappears from the internet. So there's so many different websites that are disappearing all the time. And that's why Brewster Kahle of the Internet Archive was so insistent on capturing all this and putting it in the Internet Archive to make it available for folks. And so the Internet Archive was also very interested in these new emerging models of how to better archive the internet with these more decentralized models. And so that's why they put on the DWeb Summit, the Decentralized Web Summit, to talk about, these different emergent models, to talk about, more decentralized metaverse. So there's a whole other group of people that, whether it's Decentraland or, the Somnium space, or some crypto voxels, or the sandbox. These are all like the portions of the metaverse or the virtual worlds that are all based upon the more decentralized web philosophy, meaning that you can buy different plots of virtual land, and that from that you're able to build different things on top of that. But the idea is that you're able to have
advertisements
modes. Well, you have the ways that you could get paid through ownership of those virtual objects in a way that doesn't mean that you may necessarily have to have ads, that you may be able to sustain yourself by
buying a plot of land next door to Snoop Dogg's virtual mansion.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of ways in which that just this whole concept of buying and selling virtual land, I'm kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's virtual reality. Why would you need to have like a virtual land that you're buying and selling? But I think, the arguments that are given is that, for one, we're in a skeuomorphic phase of these new immersive technologies. So we know what it means to buy and sell actual land. And so because we have an embodied experience of what that means, then there's an analog of translating that into the virtual world of buying and selling of virtual plots of land. But also existing business models, meaning that you would buy a plot of land and then you presumably improve it in some fashion. And so it creates a financial infrastructure of ownership within that world, but also attention, because we have a limited amount of time and attention. So if you have a financial incentive of the buying and selling the land, does that mean that there's going to be the market dynamics that make it so that the experiences are going to be that much better? Now, my experience has been that those virtual worlds that are based upon those cryptocurrencies have not actually had as compelling experiences as more of the social VR worlds like Rec Room, VR Chat, Altspace, or the ones that are more focused on the actual embodied experience of what's happening in the virtual world versus kind of buying and selling of speculating on virtual plots of land.
Right. That's interesting. Before we got another guest coming on here in a couple minutes. And you could stick around. You're here for the duration,
yeah,
Ken?
Sure.
Okay, amazing. Because we got a lot more to talk about. Like this conversation is so fascinating to me. But real quick, I just wanted to share this.
Snoop Dogg is a plot smoker.
I don't know if you guys heard about this, but literally Snoop Dogg, I'm not sure which metaverse he's building it in, but he's building a virtual mansion, and then somebody like people are like buying plots of land around Snoop Dogg. I mean, it's insanity. Like it's so crazy. Let's do let's share real quick. I want to show you guys is Mark Zuckerberg's vision for the metaverse.
Imagine you put on your
Can you guys hear
glasses
this?
or headset and you're
Mhm.
instantly in your home space. It has parts of your physical home recreated virtually. It has things that are only possible virtually, and it has an incredibly inspiring view of whatever you find most beautiful.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, gotta find something to wear. All right, perfect.
Boy.
Oh, hey, Mark. Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
What's up, Mark?
Whoa, we're floating in space?
Uh-huh.
Who made this place? It's awesome.
Right? It's from the creator. I met in LA.
This place is amazing.
Boz, is that you?
Of course it's me. You know I had to be the robot, man.
I thought I
So
was
there's no
supposed to be
stick
the
of butter
robot.
here, but you got the robot man.
I knew you were bluffing.
Hey, wait. Where is Naomi?
Let's call her.
Naomi.
Hey, should we deal you in?
Hey, sorry I'm running late, but you've got to see what we're checking out. There's an artist going around Soho hiding AR pieces for people to find.
3D street art?
Could you
That's
imagine all your
cool.
friends having this
Send that
much
link over
interesting
so we can all
stuff
look
going
at
on
it.
at all times?
This is stunning.
I don't think it's gonna look like this at all.
Wait, it's disappeared.
This is amazing.
If I had to be
Hold
honest.
on, I'll tip the artist and they'll extend it.
Wow.
That was cool. It's like I'll tip the
You guys
artist
like
and
it
they'll
here?
extend it.
I
So
have
it's like
another
a
that you're gonna
VR
love. Check out this forest
NFT
room.
that an artist created, and
Huh,
then like
let's see it.
you'll see it and then it goes away.
Koi
They see
fish
it
that
in
fly.
AR, and
That's
then they'll
new.
see it and then it goes away, and
This
they
is
can
wild.
tip the artist to keep it going.
Hey, one sec,
Like,
pause. It's
there are
Priscilla.
some interesting concepts.
Hey, you have to see this. Beast is going crazy.
Oh, I love that guy.
Everybody's
We've gotta
lives
show
are
that to
so
the kids.
interesting.
I
Can you
know.
also send that to my dad?
So what's going
I'll
on?
message him.
All right, see you at home. This place is great, Boz, but there's something I got to get back to. All right, so that's a glimpse of a few ways that we're going to be able to get together and socialize in the metaverse.
What do you think?
He still
Well,
looks like
it's-
Satan.
What's that?
Shh, we're streaming on Facebook too.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, Facebook just launched their Horizon, or I said Meta just launched their Horizon Worlds, and it's a little bit of a copy and crib of a lot of different patterns from Rec Room. Actually, I think the most successful social VR worlds right now are Rec Room and VR Chat, are probably the two biggest of the different in terms of the action and innovation. Rec Room's more focused on the gaming and the action and being able to sort of interact with people in a way that you're sort of playing some sort of game. And there's much more interesting world building and worlds to explore and avatars that are created. What's interesting about that clip is that, most of the avatars for Facebook, they make you be a human. Whereas in actual in VR Chat, so many of the different avatar representations are like furries and, so many different wider range.
I
of
heard
different
that the
types of
furries
that.
are taking over VR already.
Well, furries are actually probably one of the most innovative, groups out there in terms of like they're early adopters for so many of
Right.
these technologies. So in terms of like holding conventions and buying and selling and creating a whole commerce, I mean, they started from having a lot of cartoons that then are being translated into these personas or their kind of avatar representations that are the transformation of what they feel like they most identify with. And so there's a lot of the furry culture that actually translates quite well over into these. Rather than buying a fursuit, people may spend that same amount of money into developing a whole fully rigged virtual reality avatar of their persona so that they can spend time in these different virtual worlds.
Persona, I love it. Let me ask you this: to what extent, like right now, because I haven't adopted VR yet. I plan when we're moving into the new house, we got the new studio. I actually plan on investing in some VR, and I'm really interested to see. But to what extent, what we just saw with Zuckerberg's version of the metaverse, like if I have a group of friends who are already in VR, am I like what we just saw? Is that close to what I can expect in Rec Room or VR Chat?
Yeah, actually, there's certainly a lot of things like that, sitting around a table and playing a card game, and there's plenty of different apps to be able to do that, or even within some of these social VR worlds. Now, what I will say is that sometimes it's not so easy to kind of get everybody together. And I think that's something that the friction of how easy it is to just kind of jump into VR and meet up with your friends is something that has been a lot harder than it should have for a long time. But I think that the caveat is that, obviously the biggest VR headset for standalone is the Quest. There's a lot of concerns that I have personally around the future of surveillance and everything else. Currently, the way it's set up now is that you need a Facebook account to even use the Quest. They say they're going to be dropping that, but I think as far as right now, it's still set up that you still have to have like in the Facebook. If you've deleted your Facebook as an example, then you have to like figure out how to either create a new account that doesn't get deleted because it thinks it's a fake account. But anyway, so it's certainly possible with the caveat that unless you go into full-on PC VR with either the Vive or if you go with one of the HTC products, which is much more expensive. You're talking about having a VR ready PC, which is anywhere from 10,000 to, or not 10,000, but $1,000 to $1,500 or $2,000 to have a full ready. It's like a high-end gaming PC. On top of that, then another $600 or $1,000 for the VR headset. So anywhere from like $1,500 to $3,000 you could spend. But with the Oculus Rift, it's like $300, or the Oculus Quest 2, which is now going to be called Meta Quest. Although the branding hasn't fully shifted, so if you search for Oculus Quest, then you may still see it as that. So yeah, it's like $300, and it's certainly, this is like a Star Wars experience that you could go and play. This is Nathy playing one of the latest experiences of Star Wars Galaxies. So yeah, certainly the type of experiences that you saw is already possible, and people are already doing that. There's a documentary called We Met in Virtual Reality that is shot by Joe Hunting that I think it shows a little bit of the bleeding edge of what's happening within avatar culture within virtual reality.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm excited because we also have another guest joining us right now, a huge supporter of this show and the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Also, he's been around the block for a minute or two when it comes to programming. He works with Google as well, ladies and gentlemen. The one, the only, Aaron Desario. Aaron, how are you? Oh, let's see if we got him. Oh, there we go. There's Aaron.
Hello. Hi.
How are you? You excited for this
doing
conversation?
Well. I am. Yeah, I've been listening in and making notes and all kinds of fun stuff. I got to say, I don't know anything about Google's VR efforts, so this will be great for me to talk about my ass.
I know a lot about Google's VR efforts.
Why don't you kick us off there then?
Well, so Google, they actually started with the Google Cardboard, which was a little bit of at Google I/O, I think around 2015 or 2016. They launched like the very, very low end of a VR headset. And then eventually they went into the Daydream, which was their self-contained headset, which was built on the Android operating system. But I think they bought a number of really interesting things. They bought like Tilt Brush, and they bought a game studio called Alchemy Labs that did a number of different video games, the Job Simulator and the Vacation Simulator. And Google Earth is probably one of the most amazing virtual reality experiences still up to this point. They were able to basically go anywhere on the Earth within, and it's an incredible experience to be able to basically take what they've done on the Earth VR or the Google Earth and be able to create a virtual reality experience of that.
Right.
It's absolutely incredible.
They marry, I did see that they were marrying educational materials with that as well. So you could like zoom into the pyramids and then go tour the pyramids there.
Well, that's the first half of the story. I mean, the other part is Google Expeditions, but everything that I just mentioned has basically been shuttered. It's been closed down because I think Google, the problem with a company like, the problem with virtual reality in general is that you have to be more of a game development company. And Google is not like a game development company.
Right.
They're kind of like a company that wants to release something and have it reach 1 billion people. But when you're talking about like a new emergent platform, you really needed to treat it more like a game development company and stick with it over time and let it grow organically. But I think that there's a sort of lack of patience when it came to Google, and like just say Google Cardboard as an example. They're taking something about the virtual reality, but making it as cheap as possible to send out millions of those headsets. And the New York Times are sending it out, but the actual experience of the Google Cardboard was terrible because it wasn't like like the whole point of virtual reality was to be fully embodied and to have your hands in the game, but they were just focusing on like the 3 degree of freedom, 360 videos, and the cheapest that you could possibly make it. It was literally
Right.
you just put your phone in it.
Yeah, compared to the Oculus experience, it's vastly different.
So they basically pivoted everything over into AR core and augmented reality, and so they've continued to progress their overall platform with developing things in AR core. And they have the Google Glass that has an enterprise edition, but they're also, I think, they just hired somebody to write the Android or the operating system for augmented reality. So they're certainly going to probably be there, but because, like I was talking about earlier, the Google and Apple, they both have the phone ecosystem, which gives them a little bit of complacency where they don't want to rock the boat too much because they have an established platforms. And so they haven't been as likely to dump billions of dollars to be able to cultivate the virtual reality ecosystem in the same way that, say, Microsoft or Meta have to be able to develop their platforms.
Right. So, I mean, what this is, and again, I want to circle back here because I think this is important. So, when we talk about, if somebody wants to begin to explore like VR, so like, can you give us like the current state of VR? Like, what is state of the art VR currently?
State of the art would be PC VR. There's Vario headsets, which cost like $3,000 to $6,000. They're super high resolution. But most people that are more consumer based would probably go with something more like the Valve Index. And that's a couple of years old. And so we're kind of waiting to hear like the next iteration, whether, they're going to do some sort of standalone with the, I know that Brad Lynch has been reporting on the Deckard, which is maybe their next sort of standalone version of the headset for Valve. But like a Valve Index is probably like what I use a lot. And being able to have like either Vive trackers to be able to track your body and full body tracking. So getting like 3 or 5 different trackers to be able to go into a thing like virtual VR chat, and then to be able to go to dance clubs and to go to rave scenes and to be able to move your full body and full body avatar representation. But it also kind of depends on what context you want to do, whether that's gaming or medical applications or education or telepresence and enterprise training. There's aspects of virtual reality as a medium that are tapping into these principles. What I'd say is like embodied cognition, meaning that we think using not only just our brains, but our entire body and our body in motion. So the computing paradigm moving into more of an embodied paradigm means that there's so many different affordances that come when you have your full body immersed within an experience. And some of those biggest things are training applications. And so there's the HP Omnicept that has like high-end eye tracking, and it has tracking different aspects of cognitive load and tracking your blood rate. And so it's able to track all these different things while you're learning different stuff because you're in the context of that world and taking different actions, and it's being able to track what's happening with your mind and how much cognitive load you have and how difficult it is to do these different activities. So it really depends on what industry vertical you're talking about, but you can look across the spectrum across all these different domains of human experience and see that virtual reality has got some cutting edge application. I like to track a lot of what's happening at the film festivals. So Sundance and South by Southwest and the Venice Film Festival and IFA Doc Lab and the Tribeca Film Festival. This is where a lot of the cutting edge immersive storytelling is there. And I guess one other shout out I'd throw is this project called the Meta Movie Project, where you get immersed into this whole virtual world, and it's it's like a movie, but you're in it, you're a character. So it's like live action role playing with immersive theater and these like 4 other actors in this whole scene where you go through this world, and there's other audience members that are kind of these iBots that are flying around being able to track and watch the movie. So really the cutting edge is the blending of immersive theater, immersive storytelling, and virtual reality storytelling that's kind of creating these kind of Westworld type of experiences that have already started to happen.
It's the murder mystery dinner theater for this.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what are we seeing like when it comes to let's say, for example, a digital nomad. I'm somebody who is, I'm an entrepreneur, I run my own business. I want to start getting into VR. Are there places where I should start looking?
Oops.
Nope.
Oh, no.
I thought I froze there for a second, but
I did
Michael
too.
did.
We'll wait until he comes back.
I'm sure he'll be back in a second. Nope,
Oh,
there he
there it
goes. It's that moving internet.
The last thing
You
we
guys
heard
hear me?
is, are there places we
Check,
should
check.
be looking?
Yep, we got you, Michael. You can hear us, yeah?
You were saying,
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like yeah. So I'm saying, like, as a digital nomad or as an entrepreneur, and I want to find ways to better immerse myself in this digital world, in this VR space. Where should I be looking? Where should I go?
well, it really depends on what context you're talking about. Like if you're talking about gaming, there's lots of games that are out there. If you're talking about professional networking, then turns out AltSpace has a lot of different types of professional networking. That's the social VR network by Microsoft, which oddly also has Burning Man. So a lot of the virtual Burning Man has been happening within. It's like corporate, networking from Accenture, and then Burning Man. So a lot of the art from Burning Man is happening in AltSpace. But it really depends on the types of experiences that you want to have, because
Right.
it's like the type of context. So if you name a context, if it's like education, there's Engage VR, which is a lot of places where people are doing training and being able to network, or there's different groups of people, of educators that are meeting up in AltSpace VR and having these weekly meetings. And so I'd say a lot of like the more meetup type of things are happening in AltSpace, and then the more exotic sort of open world, avant-garde experimental things are happening in VR chat from both the world building. A common thing that happens in VR chat is a series of worlds that are built, and then you go take and world hop from world to world to world, kind of exploring different worlds. And so people who've spent a lot of time, then they kind of have their favorite spots. And so going in there and going on world hopping adventures with your friends, or if you want to play games and play paintball or laser tag with your friends, then like Rec Room is probably the best place to go, where you are able to go in and actually play a lot of these mini games. And Rec Room is kind of a user generated platform, to the point where you can actually start to create these games and these worlds from within the virtual world. So if you're thinking about like wanting to create your own worlds, then you can start to do that within Rec Room. There's a lot of different, like, say, modeling technology if you want to make your own experiences, from everything from Gravity Sketch to be able to do modeling. There's Tilt Brush, which was deprecated by Google, but it turned into an open source project. So there's been actually a number of different projects that have come out of it, like OpenBrush. So there's lots of different ways to, depending on what you want to do. There's so many different tracks. It's hard to kind of abstractly give an answer to that question in the absence of knowing specifically of what you're looking for, who you're trying to meet up with.
Right.
But yeah, I'd say, a lot of these worlds, it's the same type of thing of like these Discord communities. Like any substantial community has like an existing Discord community. And from those Discord communities, then you often launch into these other virtual worlds where people are kind of meeting up and either having these different adventures or these different discussions, or actually building or making stuff together.
The thing about Discord is that there's no VR gear, right? I can just sit here and do my regular work.
Yet.
And, well, yeah, sure. I'm not sure I would sit on it with VR gear and a camera focused on my face 24/7. But what actually, that's a great question. Like, what sort of percentage of time do you see people sitting there with VR gear on their faces in the future?
A lot of the a lot of people on Discord are not in VR at all. I didn't mean to imply that. I just mean that a lot of communities, if they're big enough, they usually have a Discord community where you have like a back channel that people can have where they start to meet up with each other. And I see that across all of the internet. For any substantially viable community, there's the Discord discussions that are happening. But in terms of I'd say there's different degrees of tolerance that people have. Like, say, for a lot of people, it's better for them to go to a day-long conference on Zoom, because they just wouldn't have the endurance to be able to be in VR
you
for
can
6
tune out.
hours.
Exactly. I can tune out, or I can walk into my kitchen and get coffee and just kind of carry the conference and listen in as I go.
Yeah, but there and there's a whole Verbella, which is a lot of the virtual conferences that have been happening, and other virtual platforms that are more conference specific. But there was a number of conferences that I went to from the prefabs community that were within VR chat, where they sat there for 6 to 8 hours. And it felt the most like a virtual conference that I've been in. But people within VR chat, they have a tolerance of being able to be in VR for 6 to 8 hours or 12 hours without that much difficulty because they spend so much time in those worlds. So there have been experiences where I have kind of recreated that feeling of going to a conference and sitting in the room and having the discussions in the hallways and chatting with folks. But there's a number of different, for every major I'd say virtual world, there's always a group of makers and creators, and those are the types of folks that I try to connect with in terms of just to keep up to speed as to what's happening within a community. So I end up meeting up with a lot of the world makers within Altspace, or there's the prefab community within VR Chat, or there's the different makers within Rec Room. I don't spend as much time in Rec Room. It's probably more time within VR Chat and Altspace. But yeah, I mean, it's and I think the thing that I think about is that some people are into very specific things. Like I know Michael and Lou and Aaron, you track the UFO topic to some degree. So imagine people that are really into the UFO and then consciousness, and then some other weird thing like procedure or music or something like that. So imagine like or acting or whatever that ends up being, in this case, or philosophy. You have ways that you have these intersections of people that, like when you have within Portland, there's meetup groups. Well, imagine there's meetup groups where you have one big topic. I imagine what's going to happen, because there are these virtual worlds, it's going to be these intersections of meetup group. It's going to be like the intersection of like UAP with philosophy, with consciousness and virtual reality. That'll be like a meetup with maybe 6 people in the world. But those are the intersections that each of them are really, 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 really into. And what's exciting is that as we move forward, that people are going to be able to start to create culture. They're able to create events, create artifacts, to create worlds, and to the point where there isn't enough of a viable community to be able to establish cultural artifacts. You can start to do this kind of speculative world building where you want to create a future that doesn't quite exist yet. And you start to imagine that future, and kind of like the Black Panther did with Wakanda, and start to build out a fully fleshed world. And so I think we're going to see a lot of folks that are kind of using the virtual reality platform as a platform for this world building concept that then leads into other intellectual property that could be movies or whatnot. But it's sort of like
I think the key though is tolerance, right? Because I think you'll find that a lot of people won't have the tolerance to spend 6 to 8 hours inside of a VR, or the effort that it requires to be on when you're interacting with other people. You have to you can't just sit around and drink your coffee and be lazy. You've got to
scroll on your
pay
phone
attention.
in VR.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wonder if a lot of people would just sort of reject this sort of technology because it requires too much effort, that they have to, they have to pay attention, they have to be involved, they have to, put on this gear, they have to engage. Exactly. When rather a passive experience is probably more people's style.
Well, there's certainly immersive stories where that doesn't require you to be around other people. And there's experiences that are focused and tuned, like Half-Life Alyx is an experience from Valve, which is probably one of the most epic, adventures you could go on right now in virtual reality, in terms of like going into the Half-Life world and being into this quite a horror experience. But it's the world building and the architecture and the storytelling. I mean, it's Valve, and they did an amazing.
I'm sure the porn industry is huge here too, as well.
Well, it does exist, but a lot of people would think that the pornography is driving innovation, but porn is not driving innovation in VR. Gaming is. Yeah, okay. Gaming is driving innovation, and it has been for quite a while. There is a presence of the porn industry, but it isn't at the same level that it was once. The golden era of porn driving innovation.
You're gonna have to buy extra hardware for that kind of experience.
Yes. There is a thing called teledildonics and haptic. Maybe they're on the bleeding edge of haptic explorations there.
Did you say dildonics?
Teledildonics, yeah. You can imagine what that might mean.
I can't believe it's a word.
But are you saying that industry is driving haptic technology?
No, I mean, I'd say they're not driving really anything. I mean, aside from maybe 360 video and the web, the open web, because you can't have it unless you're in WebXR technologies. So there is a browser within Oculus, and I think the OpenXR is a standard. There's also there's OpenXR and then there's WebXR. OpenXR is more around it creating an open platform that most of the people within the XR industry have adopted, which is great, which means that we're on the pathway of creating a technology that is more agnostic to the point where if you build a piece of software, you'll be able to potentially have it across lots of different pieces of hardware. At the beginning, it was more dependent on you to have to rewrite it for everybody's SDK. But right now, it's with OpenXR that is being adopted across the industry and be integrated within Unity and Unreal Engine and adopted by Meta and Valve as well. So basically, it'll be a baseline. But WebXR is to be able to have experiences on the web. And there is a browser that is on the Chromium browser. And Safari and Apple haven't fully implemented the WebXR spec, which is honestly kind of holding back the entire open web, open metaverse ecosystem. But with things like WebGPU and being able to compile things down into the latest web specifications, that there is a movement of the open web. And if I'd say there's one thing where the porn industry is innovating, it's in business models for the open web. But most of the innovation, probably 95% of the innovation, is coming from
gaming. Right.
It's all about the gamers.
Right. And so for now, if I wanted to play specific games, I'm gonna need a specific device. Is that right? Or am I able to access the things I want with Oculus on Steam or Steam? How are those things integrated?
Oh, yeah. So there is a PC VR ecosystem, and there was originally the Oculus Rift and then the Oculus Quest and Quest 2, but Oculus actually deprecated the Rift, the PC VR, and now you just have the Quest, which means that there are ways to do like an Airlink where you can have a PC and play PC VR through Steam and start to actually transmit through something like Virtual Desktop or using their own software or using the Oculus Quest Link cable to be able to tether yourself to a PC. So if you do have a PC, then a lot of people are using the Quest to be able to have access to their PC, but you also have access to the mobile standalone VR experiences. So Steam has a great repository of different experiences. There are still some PC-based VR experiences on Oculus Home. There's like a few hundred, like 300 or so VR experiences on the standalone. And then I'd say the other big distributor is probably with the Viveport for HTC. They actually have a lot of more immersive storytelling experiences. And then itch.io, there's a number of different more indie game experiences. So there's a quite a robust selection of different experiences out there. But I'd say because of the standalone, most of the energy has been pivoting over to most of standalone because that's where the biggest market is. So it's kind of tough going for people who are not wanting to be on that Quest ecosystem and doing just PC VR. But I imagine, part of the thing that's probably going to happen is with 5G and other ways of kind of having low latency, being able to distribute things to a headset. I've already seen experiences from Pluto VR as an example, where they have cloud rendering of experiences where I'm on my Oculus Quest, but they're able to basically render out a PC VR experience on the cloud and then send it down over the internet over my Wi-Fi. The issue is latency, and to what degree is your tolerance for the game that you're playing? Is it low enough latency? Are you dropping frames? Is it a comfortable experience? And I think for a lot of people, they were using the same type of virtual desktop to be able to stream from their PC. But for a long time, Meta was banning 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐄 from being able to actually do that type of virtual streaming because the thought was that Meta wanted to control selling the different hardware and all the experiences. And if you have the ability for you to be streaming from your PC, then that they don't have the ability for them to control that exchange. And so for a long time, they were being very proprietary around that. But I think they've either got hit with a lot of threats of anti-competitive behavior, or they just sort of decided they want to be more interoperable. But they've still banned cloud streaming. So you can't have cloud streaming on their So there's the main app, but it's also worth noting that there's both the app lab and then SideQuest. So the SideQuest is basically a way to sideload applications that are not officially accepted into the Oculus ecosystem. So for the cloud streaming, that you could go to Pluto VR and get the cloud streaming and sideload it in. But the app lab, because they saw that the app lab was so successful, Oculus created their own shadow store that doesn't have listings within their main store, but still gave an opportunity for people to do their own self-marketing and potentially graduate from their shadow store of their app lab into the main lab. So they've basically created a tiered system from like SideQuest as like the most banned if you've not, the stuff that would never get onto the store, or stuff they for whatever reason have decided to not let on. And then you have the app lab, and then you have the official Oculus store. So there's quite a lot of different ways to get accesses to experiences within the virtual reality.
Wow. Where do you see what are the applications that you're seeing when it comes to things like telemedicine and remote surgery and healthcare? Like, where do you see this headed in that realm?
Walter Greenleaf is somebody who's been tracking a lot of the different applications of medicine, and it's probably categorized into a number of different things. So there's training of the different doctors, and then there's actually doing things like neurorehabilitation for folks. So the thing about the immersive technology is it's tracking your body in a certain way, but also being able to potentially get access to the neural pathways into your brain in a way that a good example is James Blaha with his vivid visions. He was able to actually cure his lazy eye by using virtual reality, because the lazy eye, the specific, he had like diplopia. So it's not universal work for every type of lazy eye, but for his specific lazy eye, it essentially was that the muscles of his eye were not strong enough. And so what he would do is that he would weaken it to the strong eye and strengthen it to the weak eye. And he was actually able to allow himself to see in 3D for the first time in his life. But he was able to do it enough where he was able to kind of build up the muscles to the point where he could actually see in 3D all the time. There's things where you're actually using the virtual reality technologies for the different health applications. Rehabilitation is a big one as well, to be able to track and kind of give you the visual feedback that you're moving your hand more than you actually are, to give you the encouragement, and then to kind of dial that in different ways. But probably a big one is around mental health and, doing different meditation applications, pain therapy. So being able to be in virtual reality while you have burn victims getting stuff changed, and that sort of reduces their experience of the pain when they have that type of visual stimulus. And there's actually a whole new branch from the FDA called virtual therapeutics, where you actually have virtual reality experiences that are being approved as medical drugs that could be applied to
placebo effect. They trigger a placebo effect.
It's not. It's more of. It's not a placebo effect. It's more of that you're able to modulate your consciousness to the point where you have the perception of mental and social presence and active presence, and it's able to, for certain applications, it has real therapeutic impacts on folks. So there's a whole book called VRX that dives into a lot of those different applications of medical applications. And there's a section in my 1000th episode, which is in my pinned tweet, that digs into some of the more other medical applications in there. But medicine actually is one of those areas that has some of the most compelling applications for virtuality, and that has already started. The research has been going on for over 30 years. For pain management, post-traumatic stress disorder, Skip Rizzo has been working with veterans for a long time to be able to listen to stories from veterans and then be able to recreate different scenes of where the trauma happened. And that allows the soldier to have a much more emotionally visceral connection to their own story, that they can then talk to a therapist and then start to process their grief in a way that goes above and beyond not using sort of virtual reality PTSD therapy. So those are just some examples that are out there.
What about the drug trips you could take? Like you'd be on LSD and then you also put one of these on? Wow.
Yeah, that's a whole consciousness hacking. There's a whole consciousness hacking movement of people that have, or on Reddit, it's a rift into the mind of people that are mashing up the psychedelic experiences with virtual reality experiences. But that's what in the psychedelic community would call stacking. So figuring out how to either prime yourself for an experience, either with virtual reality in the beginning, in the middle, or the end. So there's lots of there's a whole conference called the Future Awakened Summit that I went to that was looking at the intersections between psychedelic therapies, spiritual contemplative practices, and virtual and immersive and augmented reality technologies.
Right. You could also have amazing meditation too, right? Not just drug.
Yeah. Trip VR is a good example of it's a service that is on the Oculus Quest, where you take these different guided meditations. And so yeah, I know that there is the Monroe Institute. I'm sure if anyone who's studied enough about some of the psychic spy programs or whatnot, there's a lot of stuff around the different types of binaural beats that are happening within those programs. But I'm looking forward to that type of content that's being translated into these virtual reality experiences to be able to help and train the brain into different wave states. But yeah, the biofeedback is also a big part of the future. Valve is working with OpenBCI and the brain-computer interfaces to be able to create virtual reality headsets that would be able to have all these other biometric and physiological marker devices within the headset. And that's on Project Galea that is going to be coming out sometime in 2022. And these are headsets that would have biofeedback so that you'd be in an immersive experience and get real-time biofeedback of what's happening physiologically, so that you could start to, tune the experience or dial in the experience in different ways to make it even more immersive.
Are there any sort of safety protocols? I mean, can you imagine where somebody creates an app that puts you into an epileptic seizure or a heart attack or something just by, showing you images that freak you out?
Well, this is an area where the design guidelines are more based upon the community. There is already established, triggers for seizures, and a lot of times when you go into like a world within VR chat, they have a way of disclosing, hey, this world actually has a lot of flashing lights, and so if you are susceptible to epileptic seizures, then maybe this is not the best world for you. So there's already kind of established normative standards that are within the communities. But in terms of,
well, I'm thinking of the black web, right? You almost get a William Gibson sort of scenario where you can die by going to the wrong website.
Yeah. I think we're certainly moving into that realm. And the larger ethical frameworks, there's going to be certain things that need to be progressed up to passing new US laws, but a lot of it's going to be kind of in the hands of being aware of what is the kind of the risks and dangers of this type of immersive and embodied entertainment. And there's a piece by Michael Metzinger and Michael Madry and Thomas Metzinger about some of those ethical codes and really dig into some of the research of what happens physiologically when we go into XR. And that's also just generally on the ethical work that I've been doing of just a lot of the research that folks that are creating experience should know from the medical implications of the other things that are, as we move forward. I think there's going to be kind of an interdisciplinary fusion of all these different, design disciplines, and a lot of things that people will need to be aware of when you think about these concepts of experiential design, because there is going to be a lot of, especially as we move forward and more people that are coming into these virtual worlds, of just, ethical considerations to take into account.
Right. And,
I think you might be muted.
We can barely keep up with legislation. Can you hear me?
Well, I was going to ask, do you see the...
There was a delay. Sorry, there was a delay, Mike.
Oh, no. Go ahead. Luis, go ahead. You had a question?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm curious to know how, because Aaron was saying earlier that no one's going to sit through, this headgear on your head and you have to be up. Like I noticed in the bar, you up, you got to be walking places. And so how small do you see the hardware getting into the future? Is it, I mean, I know from the first version of Oculus to now, it's a completely different rig. So where do you see it going? I know that Facebook just came out with a pair of glasses, didn't they?
They
contact lenses.
Those are Ray-Ban, Ray-Ban glasses. Yeah, those just have cameras on the glasses. They're not even necessarily smart glasses, although they have more smart glasses features. But yeah, I think that they could get, like these glasses that you put on.
Yeah.
There's going to be micro OLEDs, which is the next iteration. There's OLEDs, but the micro OLEDs are going to be like even smaller screens that then get amplified. So the form factors are already starting to, and like the next generation, you're going to start to see more micro OLEDs that are getting out there. And in the HTC came out with the Focus that is kind of like just more glasses that you put on, and some of the form factor. I think it's going to get more and more like these glasses, and yeah, like Aaron said, potentially even eye contact lenses at some point, potentially, depending on if they figure out how to power it. But one thing I just also wanted to mention about VR in general is that, when you read your phone, you kind of get into this state of mind where you just kind of, doom scrolling is the thing that I'm sure a lot of people have this experience of just kind of scrolling through Twitter, and you may be searching for something you don't know, what you just kind of like mindlessly going through and looking
Sounds
at
like my
things.
Netflix experience every night.
And so I think actually the immersive and virtual reality technologies are kind of taking a shift from that asynchronous type of experience into the embodied real-time being in the moment. And I think that is more like a commitment that you have to commit yourself to, that it's an experience that unfolds over time. It's more similar to, say, sitting down to read a book. Like, you don't sit down and just read like a paragraph of a book. Like, when you read a book, you want to like commit to like reading maybe a chapter or a few pages at least. And so in order to really immerse yourself into that experience of reading a book, then you really have to commit that time. And I think that's actually a bigger, deeper cultural shift of what these immersive technologies are suggesting, is that you have to set aside everything else and commit yourself, your full attention to that experience. And that most of the different types of experiences that you have, yes, it may be like, too long to sit for a 6 to 8 hour experience, but if you have your complete and full attention for, an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours, that's actually quite different than most of the different types of experiences where we have right now, where we have like a multi-screen experience where you kind of have your attention split between multiple things. Even if you are watching Netflix, maybe you're texting with somebody, or maybe you're on your computer, who knows? It's pretty rare right now for you to have like complete dedicated attention into any one media. And I think that's actually a bit of a pivot and a shift of culturally that the virtual reality technologies represent, is that kind of like setting everything else aside and really committing your full attention to something, which is, like I said, kind of like a cultural shift that may actually be an antidote to that other type of experience where you feel kind of dissociated or disconnected. There may be, when you make that full commitment, the possibility and potential, that doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but the potential for you to be more fully immersed, more fully embodied, and more fully present to what's emerging in that moment. And most of the different types of experiences within these virtual worlds are those different types of experiential things that are happening in the moment, whether it's with other people there or whether there's an event, whatever that may be. Having your full attention is something that actually I wouldn't discount as a big part of this move towards these virtual worlds and different experiences within the metaverse.
That's really interesting, because we do have such passive experiences when it comes to social media. Even, like, for example, people probably watching this show right now are probably not just watching this show. They're probably scrolling on something. They're probably doing something else. Maybe they're watching Netflix with a spouse. It's interesting because, and this is something that Aaron brought up earlier, that do people even want that, right? Because having a fully focused, committed, present moment, even in this reality, is so rare. Will they want to commit to that in virtual reality? It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain experiences, like, I mean, one of the experiences that are kind of counterintuitive that would be so immersive, but Tetris and Tetris Effect within VR is very, I mean, I was born in 1976, and so I grew up with Tetris and the Game Boy, and also on NES and SNES. And so I've spent a lot of time playing Tetris, and the Tetris experience within VR has like an orchestration of both music and haptics within the hands that it make it even more immersive. And there's sort of a building and releasing intention that they have with the music that has these different modes. And so it was kind of like my go-to pandemic experience for a lot of times. It was basically a way to kind of chill out. So I feel like that there are different types of experiences where people can kind of like just unwind. A lot of people go into Rec Room to play paintball or other experiences, PvP. But also just a lot of, I'd say there's different classes of different types of experience. Active presence, you want to go play games, and you want to express your agency and move around. Mental and social presence, solving puzzles or going around and interacting and playing with people. Emotional presence, you want to see a movie or you want to have your emotions moved. You want to be immersed into music, as an example, do different music visualizations. Or the embodied and environmental presence, meaning you want to have an avatar representation where you feel like you're fully immersed within an avatar representation that's more a representative of your identity that you're expressing, or be able to explore these different immersive worlds that are totally transportive into taking you into another place. So you have this illusion of
just sell me something. Just take my credit card already.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, could we do a show, say, like this right now in VR?
Yeah. There's certainly shows that are happening in VR. I think the thing around people being embodied and discussing it, actually, what maybe more suited for the medium of VR would be have, say, a group discussion. Say you want to invite people and you want to have kind of world cafes,
more of like a Discord chat versus
Yeah.
a show where people are watching.
Right. Right. There have been shows, but I think the thing that is probably more suited towards a medium is, say, the after party, after the show, then you go hang out in VR where you kind of are able to kind of decompress after you've listened to the lecture. The
Right.
talks do a great job of setting context. Context is really a key part of virtual reality, and being able to set a context and what is the invitation of that context. There's the Priya Parker's The Art of the Gathering, which talks about the art of the invitation. The invitation is inviting people with the intention and the purpose for why they're gathering. And then there's the context of where you're gathering and the purpose of that. And then once you have that, then what type of interactions do you want to have? What type of dialogues do you want to get from the people? So there was actually just a series of different conversations that happened in AltSpace last week about human rights and put on by XRSI, that's the XR Safety Initiative. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation was holding a number of different group discussions around brainstorming what are different aspects of human rights within virtual reality and how do we start to do that. And it was kind of like a group discussion that happened that could only happen because there was a big group of people that were sharing their ideas. And then we moved into some like more World Cafe brainstorming about the future of the decentralized metaverse and how that interfaces with the future of XR. So there's a lot of different groups. The Open Metaverse Interoperability Group is a group that has been meeting within Discord, and M3 is the Metaverse Makers group that was having these weekly meetups within Mozilla Hubs, which was kind of like the open source built on an open source stack of WebXR and a built in Mozilla being the Firefox. And then they've continued to work on this Mozilla Hubs, meaning that you can start to have these social VR interactions within the web, where it was much easier to share different pictures of different things that people have been working on, or share PDFs or share videos. So there's lots of different types of VR, social VR mediums to gather in different ways that each of them facilitate different types of interactions when you actually start to meet there.
Right. Just going back real quick to the potential for telemedicine and then beyond that, somebody mentioned earlier this idea of, and I don't know if this is true or not, I think Case for Infinity mentioned it, like people who are an abusive person having to go into a VR experience of experiencing the abuse they were giving. Is there, like, when it comes to things like that, or maybe Gestalt therapy where you're facing your fears or you're being immersed in something, are these things happening? Is this real?
Yeah, both of these things are happening. I'll start with the Gestalt therapy because that's actually kind of interesting. There's a book of VRX that was talking about how sometimes folks with schizophrenia have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. There's actually a whole trialogue therapy that they actually go into these immersive worlds. And part of the, with schizophrenia, there's the voices that come in and you don't always know where they're coming from. But so someone with schizophrenia would tell the doctor what the voices are saying. And then the doctor would embody those voices and start to create like a psychodrama experience that would able to give voice of those voices outside of their kind of imaginal, or they're kind of inside of their head, but coming outside of their head, for them to be able to differentiate between themselves and other and be able to shut them down. And then that type of therapy actually being as effective as drugs to be able to help, reduce that type of voices that are occurring. So that's from a book called VRX, talking about some of those medical applications. But in terms of the it's more in terms of the training and the empathy, there's certainly immersive stories that deal with different aspects of empathy, but this is, I'd say, probably what we're talking about here is more along the lines of diversity and inclusion training for different companies that have created ways of giving someone a direct embodied experience within a virtual reality of like a 360 video of someone receiving microaggressions, or talking or giving an experience where you say something, but you're discounted because you're a woman within the workplace, and that there's sort of inherent aspects of sexism or racism. And so there's these types of VR training modules that are some ways required by a lot of these different companies, and they've been using different virtual reality experiences because you can give people the direct embodied experience of some of those things
I hope
that
the acting is better than my current training videos. The acting is just so terrible.
right, yeah, it's more it's everything from virtual sort of CGI into more VR. And yeah, I haven't seen some of them, but I know that there's some of them out there, so I can't speak to the actual acting quality. But this is something that is often laws, either from federal laws or state laws, where there's certain requirements for diversity and inclusion training and bias training. And so some of those different training modules have been used within virtual reality. So that's probably the closest analog in terms of building empathy or allowing people to shift perspectives and to have a simulation of an experience that would allow them to start to experience different aspects of that go be above and beyond their own direct embodied experiences.
Right.
I had one of my friends of mine had told me about this years ago, that this idea of this virtual reality world is coming, because, and I'm curious to know if you've heard about anything like this. He was telling me about cable companies giving away these VR headsets because it's an incentive for people to come back to cable, and they can attend primarily sporting events. And they can attend it with their friends. So if I'm a Miami Dolphins fan and I want to watch the Dolphins play in Miami from California with a whole bunch of my friends from home or family, I could get a seat on the 50-yard line, and I could virtually be there at the game in the stadium with as many friends as I want, talking about whatever I want as the game's going on. And sort of this idea of inviting people to come into this and
So
introducing.
watch party.
Yeah, it's like giving
Netflix
them
watch party.
It's like, yeah, it's almost like a drug dealer giving the free sample, like just here.
Oh, you mean the cable company part?
Here's
right?
Here's the hardware. Go for it. Like, we know we're gonna make our money back on this tenfold, if not a millionfold.
The hardware will be commodity.
Well, yeah,
they,
I don't know.
At
I don't know
this
if it
point,
would be.
Isn't that the model right now for? Isn't that what Quest is?
Well,
I mean, I know it's not for free, but like
it's only $300 right at this point.
It has been,
like,
yeah, it's being subsidized, but I do foresee a future potentially where 5G and the 5G networks, where 5G is going to have so much more bandwidth. It's going to be potentially like getting the equivalent of fiber connectivity, but being anywhere. So imagine, like, in order to have that bandwidth, one of the things that has been suggested is that they're going to have a lot more augmented reality ways of kind of overlaying very sophisticated, remote rendered experiences on top of reality when you're out through something like augmented reality. However, I just was at the Augmented Reality Expo that was in Santa Clara, and most of the AR is like looking through like a very small window. When you hold up your phone, you have like a portal, but imagine that portal being even smaller, but closer to your eye. And so it's like it's not as immersive as the virtual reality. Probably the most immersive kind of augmented reality I've seen is the Tilt 5, which uses a completely different paradigm, which has two projectors that send out light beams that then hit a retroreflective material that is more about AR gaming. So tabletop gaming experiences. The Tilt 5 is going to revolutionize tabletop gaming, and it was absolutely incredible. It felt like imagine being in the Star Wars and seeing those holograms. And
that's the
hologram
first thing
chess.
I thought about. the Star Wars chess.
It's the closest that I've seen that. And because it uses the retroreflective material, it automatically kind of does occlusion properly and the combining of things. And it just is a really closed context of the use case of tabletop gaming. It's not trying to do AR when you're walking around the world. That's a whole other thing that wouldn't work, because you're not going to be carrying around retroreflective materials everywhere. But this works when you have like looking at a fixed object on the table, and it's an amazing innovation when it comes to augmented reality. It's basically going to...
Could you imagine like using that for like instead of buying a pool table, you just use your dining room table and you're like playing pool with that sort of technology?
Yeah, and it's going to be, but more for the board games, I'd say, less than like pool. More of like having people remote as well, being able to see the same board. So you have like kind of a portal into a magical world, but you both are sharing that portal, and you're going to have different ways of having their presence there. So it'd be kind of like playing board games with people. So the Tilt 5, keep an eye out on Tilt 5. I did an interview with Jerry Ellsworth. She's, a complete badass, and her story is, amazing story of a hero's journey of what she had to go through to create this. But going back to the where I was going with was basically the subsidizing of hardware. I imagine if AR gets to be as good as Tilt 5, but out in the world, then maybe we'll start to see like telecom companies starting to subsidize augmented reality headsets in order for people to get kind of like how there's different ways in which that they subsidize phones that if you buy into their plan for a certain amount of time, then you get the phone for free essentially, or it's greatly reduced. I
Look what
imagine
happened to
eventually that'll
TiVo,
happen.
right? I mean, TiVo invented the DVR, but they don't. I don't think they make very much anymore because all the cable companies made their own stuff.
Yeah, the whole content ecosystems have way changed.
Wow,
I haven't
I'm
heard
watching.
anything
I'm watching the
around
Tilt
VR.
5 thing right now. This is incredible.
Put it up and show us.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, you keep talking, Ken. I'll pull this up. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's Tilt 5. So just a quick background, Joe Ellsworth. She was like a race car driver, high school dropout, and then a self-taught engineer who basically kind of networked her way into working into Silicon Valley. She basically copied. She started building and designing ASICs and FPGAs and these silicon chips, and then she got kind of stalked and recruited by Valve, and Valve is of course one of the biggest video game companies in the world. Sometime in 2009, 2010, but in 2011, she went to start the hardware lab at Valve. And at Valve, they were both innovating both aspects of augmented reality and virtual reality. And they Jerry stumbled upon this by accident of this kind of retro-reflective materials to be able to have these immersive experiences for these glasses. That she went on and she ended up getting fired from Valve. Then she got from Gabe Newell the intellectual property for these. Then she did Cast AR, which basically started and failed because it was, bad timing, but also, she wasn't the leader and other people were trying to go too quickly and growing. But eventually she was able to get the assets of Cast AR and then do Tilt 5. So Tilt 5 was born out of the research that was originally happening within Valve, but Jerry Ellsworth was able to kind of carry the intellectual property and do all these different innovative patents that go above and beyond what anybody else has been able to do. So this is I had never had a chance to see it, and I was just absolutely blown away with how immersive it was, because it really felt like I was being immersed into these other worlds. And they have a 6 degree of freedom wand to be able to interact with these worlds, and it kind of flips over and it has more of a Nintendo controller. So there's actually, up to like 40 different games that have been built for this. And the Kickstarters are just shipping now. And if you wanted one, this is probably a good kind of like holiday gift, although they probably won't be launching it or shipping until like January or February because they're so back ordered.
Damn, how much are they, Mike?
They're like $395, $350 or something, like 300, 400. Dude, reserve now. What's it say?
I mean, those goggles are pretty goofy, but
well, it's
it is cool.
On top of them, there's actually projectors and there's polarized lens in there, and yeah, it's hard to describe how magical it is, but it is quite amazing.
Yeah, it's wild.
And it's a form factor of augmented reality that is bounded to the tabletop gaming context. So it's not trying to like boil the ocean and solve all the world's problems with computer vision and everything else, but it takes an approach where it's affordable, and it just hits a sweet spot of just feeling utterly magical. So I think the Oculus DK1 was the first development kit for the Oculus Rift DK1. That was what seeded the entire VR industry back in like 2013 when it finally launched, and then into 2014. I expect that something like Tilt 5 is going to be the equivalent of that first kind of development kit that's really starting to pioneer different human-computer interaction and augmented reality affordances when it comes to having a group of people around a shared space, either together with you face-to-face where people can use the same board and play together, or be able to be remote with each other and play. So after seeing it at Augmented World Expo, I was completely blown away. And then the interview that I did with Jerry blew my mind even more, because she's just an amazing person and it knows how to tell a story. So if you want to hear like a pretty epic story of somebody who like, rubbing elbows with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and all the people at Valve, and it was just like, wow, just an incredible story.
That's
and
wild.
yeah, keep an eye out for Tilt 5. They're going to be making some waves here in 2022. That's for sure.
You mentioned 5G, and so do you think that 5G will be the thing that actually democratizes, or not democratizes, but gives access to these sorts of things? Because right now, I mean, you have hardware, you have Wi-Fi, you have a lot of obstacles for people to adopt these technologies. Do you think 5G is going to make it a lot different? And what's happening with 5G in the US, and how close are we to actually having access?
Let me also tack on Wi-Fi 7 and whether you think that would have an impact.
I haven't heard much as Wi-Fi 7. I know Wi-Fi 6E is the big thing that a lot of folks have been talking on it right now. But a lot of the chips, say for Qualcomm's XR2 has like support for Wi-Fi 6E. But so yeah, these chips, 5G. Well, let's see. At this point, 5G is basically, creating what you could think of as like fiber optic connectivity anywhere, when you're walking around. So when you have that type of connectivity, then these types of immersive worlds in AR and VR make sense that you would, now that you have that, when you download different stuff, you have to upload the world and everything. It takes a long time. So it just, the ability to kind of download that type of immersive world anywhere means that there's going to be a lot more potentials for augmented reality type of experiences. But I personally don't think that too many people are going to be walking around with VR headsets. I think that most people, when they put on a VR headset, they're going to be at home. And when they have AR, they're going to be out in public. That's at least how I think of it. I may be wrong. Like maybe because there's a game called Space Pirate Trainer, which was all about like shooting like different things, but they've created a PvP where you have to have the space of like a tennis court, half of a tennis court, or have like a basketball court, where it feels like you're running around playing laser tag with somebody. I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I have done an equivalent type of thing for the zero latency was in Las Vegas, where they had a location-based entertainment. It was something similar like that, where I've done that type of thing before. But like something like that, like if you wanted to go out and play the Space Pirate Trainer on your tennis courts, but you still need to have Wi-Fi connectivity, and something like 5G would allow something like that to happen. So if you have like an ability to kind of enclose your space and be protected and not have people mess with you or steal your stuff, then yeah, maybe people will start to do VR in public. But the experience of AR kind of sucks right now. Like there isn't stuff that I've seen that makes it as compelling or immersive as VR. And a lot of the stuff that is in AR is more in the realm of enterprise, where you're on the factory floor and it's more utilitarian. Like you have to, understand how to wire this thing, and you may not have learned how to do it. And so you have either a HoloLens or, the Magic Leap 2 is coming out here soon. And so you have these, and there's a whole range of different augmented reality glasses that were, shown at the Augmented World Expo, Oppo and 𝐒𝐔𝐁, and there's some other ones that are out there that Lenovo, I think A5 glasses. Qualcomm is the one that's building a lot of the chips for this stuff. But to me, it's an open question as to what degree are there going to be augmented reality experiences that are so compelling that people are going to want to wear these glasses out in public and be able to have, 5G connectivity to be able to like give them these types of experiences. If we learn anything from Pokemon Go, is that there is a value of having something that is more like site specific type of entertainment, where you go out to places and you experience something, right? That gets people out in the world and it makes them feel like they're getting exercise in it, as an example. So I imagine there's going to be something similar to that, where it's asking you to go out into the world, and maybe there's some like, just imagine like emergent social dynamics that are possible because, people, do a silent DJ concert or something, or like flash mobs, like more of those types of behaviors are going to be possible. So what ways do you want to start to get people together and have them do something in that space, whether it's, social actions or entertainment, or, kind of a fantasy world game, which is probably the most likely thing, of people going out into like Harry Potter world, or going out into whatever their favorite, comic book universe that they want to get into.
You mentioned the rave party earlier, right? So it's kind of, I could see the rave party where people go to a location and have the headsets on and interact in some sort of way that way, as opposed to the rave party where everybody's at their individual house and they're interacting in a virtual rave dance floor. I think the former would be much more attractive to people because, at least from what I know of these people, that part of the experience is the sweaty smell of the people nearby and, the bumping into other people and all of that.
Yeah. So the types of things that are bringing people together, but again, the X factor being COVID and these, these viruses and whatnot. Like, I think actually a lot of people were saying for a long time, like, oh, AR is going to be way bigger than VR because, people want to be immersed in the world. And, there's just, for me, I'm not so sure if one is going to be bigger than the other. If anything, I think they may be the same, or, like it's more of a preference as to whether or not you like to, what type of things you like to do, whether or not you like to be in the center of gravity in the real world with stuff, other things going on with kind of a modulated of your experience, or if you prefer to be completely transported into a completely different world that just completely blows your mind, but still is able to maintain certain aspects of the social dynamics that you have with other people. There's certain things like bumping into people in a mosh pit, or things are going to be way better in AR than they're going to be in VR, because you're not going to like. There are ways to start to simulate different aspects of like, haptics of like force feedback, but you're starting to talk about like, you don't want to have
psychology gets in the way, right? People aren't going to buy it. They won't, there's nobody really there.
There's a technology diffusion where right now the haptic technology is super expensive. And it's very specific to say testing cars, because you want to test the ergonomics. And when you reach over, you want to see if you're turning the dial and you have like a high-end Vario headset and you want to be able to actually feel haptic feedback when you're turning the dial, just to test the haptics of it, because you want to, before you spend millions of dollars building a car prototype, you can test it in VR. So you see those different types of things where you get haptic tests with these big high-end companies like that are building cars. But eventually the technology is going to get better and better and better to the point where you have people that have these haptic gloves or haptic vests. A haptic vest is the things that people use within virtual reality, like VR chat, for people to get hugs or to people have them get hit with bullets or whatever, to give them that much more of a visceral immersive experience, to give them that haptic feedback on their bodies. So I think there is going to be a market for that, but that's still in the, like it diffuses into it. First becomes an idea, then this enterprise market, then it becomes an enterprise market, then it maybe becomes mass ubiquitous. It doesn't always, but it kind of goes through this phase of diffusion through these different phases. And right now haptics is surely in that enterprise realm with some consumer aspects with the haptics. But, with force feedback gloves as an example, or force feedback pens, whenever you're doing surgery, that you can do like virtual reality training for surgeons in a way that this is like, shown to be like one of the, like also VR is an example where they've done a lot of shown where they can do these trainings for surgeons with these haptic things that are mimicking the tools that they're using. Like they're holding something.
Remember the game Operation?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, that's haptic feedback, right? Technically, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
You get a buzz. You're feeling the buzz.
I'm curious. I guess this will probably be the last question, but do you ever see this getting to a point where we're not going to need technicians anymore? We're not going to need mechanics anymore, because if my car breaks down, I could download a program that shows me how to fix it in augmented reality.
I ain't got time for that. I'll pay somebody to come do it with their VR set, maybe.
You think so? I was thinking, man, how cool would it be if there was an augmented reality that showed you how to fix the technology that maybe is broken, either a computer or, there are so many different applications that you could use where people could actually learn how to do something, or even train somebody at work. Like, could you imagine, Michael, as a manager at a restaurant, if you could just pop a VR headset and be like, okay, this is what you do. You got to fold napkins, you got to do this, you got to clean this, you got to move that. And it just walks them through all of their responsibilities for a couple days. And then eventually they take the thing off and they're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly, that type of training is already starting to happen. And I think that the question that you're asking is whether or not, there's things that you can research on YouTube and you can do things yourself. So, but you still may want to have a professional do it because you just don't want to have to bother doing it. And you want to just have someone take care of it and not screw it up. So,
or you don't have the tools. I spend half the time at Home Depot when I go into these projects.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why, that you could, given enough time and energy and will, you can do pretty much anything you would want. You can figure out how to do it. But I think the deeper question is whether or not you would even have a car, and whether or not there's other aspect. I mean, obviously, in getting a car to move around, but the metaphoric point is, in these virtual worlds, there may be experiences that you have a yacht, or you have the experience of flying, or you have the different types of, like, there's going to be certain aspects of our lives that are going to be potentially replaced with a digital representation of that. And having the experience of that in a social relationship is going to be just as valuable, or just as meaningful, or just as good enough as having the actual experience. Now,
Yeah, you too can clean the bilge of your yacht virtually.
there's certainly always going to be things that are going to be better in the sort of the tangible world that we're used to. But I think as we move into this experiential age, what I foresee happening actually is there's going to be a lot of jobs that exist that don't exist now. Everything, and it's already starting to happen with people, and it has for years and years with Second Life and people creating avatars and whatnot. But I see this movement into this type of experiential entertainment that is going to be much, much more like Westworld. We've already had this, in Diamond Age from Neil Stephenson. He talks about this concept of reactors. So reactive actors, immersive theater actors that work from the comfort of their home. Well, we already had that happening within 2020 with the Underpresents and the Tempest, where there was immersive theater actors in this video game world that were being paid to be actors within the context of this video game world, where there were these other actors, or the other players, that they're kind of giving them these one-on-one experiences, kind of like
where do I audition for that? Jeez.
Yeah, it's that run has ended, but there is a lot of different intersection with theater and what's happening with virtual reality. So the Meta Movie Project is an example where there's actors that are acting the Kira Benzing and a lot of the pieces that she's been doing with Finding Pandora X, and Welcome to Respite was another piece that was there. There's another piece that was premiered at Tribeca back in like 2017, but is now making a run within it's I forget the name of it right now, but there's a number of different theater pieces that are out there. But so I expect to see much more of, like, imagine what's it like to go into Westworld, absent this sort of just misogynistic, murdering, but more of like the idea of having both a combination of live immersive theater actors in a world, but also kind of story world that you're able to kind of immerse yourself into. That we're going to see a lot more of that, and there's going to be jobs that exist in the context of producing those worlds that don't exist now. And so we're going to be moving into a realm where people are going to be valuing access to experiences rather than purely just access to physical stuff. Certainly having your basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs taken care of, but when we talk about virtual fashion, or even the NFTs, or what people are kind of buying these profile pictures for, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some ways that represent them being a part of a community. It's, in Fortnite buying your virtual goods or clothing, and then in Roblox buying virtual clothes, or in Rec Room buying different representations of different clothings and wearables, or whether it's interoperable NFTs that you have, the jetpacks from Jadu, or hover boards from Jadu Hologram. So there's going to be different things that you have your avatar representation. You're able to go into these different worlds. Ideally, it's going to be an interoperable open metaverse, and not like a dystopic closed walled garden metaverse where there's just like 5 owners to everything. Kind of what's depicted in the story of Ready Player One. We kind of want to avoid that destiny where there's just one company that controls everything. And we have a world that is kind of co-created and co-owned and driven by the community. In more of these, whether it's decentralized autonomous organizations or what are the cooperative platforms, but people working together to be able to build something that is as immersive and as interesting as, the biggest IP properties that we have today with Disney and Marvel. There's going to be these immersive worlds that are driven by the grassroots community that are going to be, that are already there in VR chat. And, but I imagine more of thinking about like the Marvel universe, and Arcane is another good example of this translation of game property that was translated into this Netflix series that was on, this past week from Riot Game, or this past couple of months from Riot Games. They have this whole IP and these story worlds, and I think we're going to start to see both the unfolding of these different stories like that in the story world, but also you being to be able to be immersed within those story worlds, and you being able to be a character. Like you'll be able to go check into a hotel from the Star Wars. The Star Wars is having like this Starship Cruiser where you check in and you basically become a part of the Star Wars universe for like 3 or 4 days. You become a character.
Yeah,
awesome.
that thing is getting lambasted.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's $6,000.
Yeah.
$6,000 for a family of 4 to go to this event.
They're
to this
charging
experience.
Disney cruise prices for an
And
experience that is nowhere near that.
Man, they released a video of this part of this experience. It was so bad, Disney took it down.
Wow. Well,
They started losing reservations on it. But I see what you're saying. Yeah. Like, I think they missed the boat. They could have done something that was more VR, more AR, and way more immersive than what they're putting on the table. But yeah, I could definitely see hotels, entertainment going that route for sure.
Yeah. And
oh my God, immersive experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they're going to be more of that type of thing that's already been happening with location-based entertainment, but happening within virtual reality. And IMLX Lab has been releasing different aspects of the Star Wars universe in VR, but that type of intersection between, say, the immersive theater and the virtual reality is this confluence of things that are going to continue to be coming together. It's just the live acting and the kind of being immersed in those different worlds, whatever your favorite world may be. So yeah, it's going to be. I don't know. Depending on what happens with the pandemic, I think we'll also continue to set the larger context for the degree to which that some of this stuff becomes attractive for folks that may have taken longer. I think that with everything being shut down and locked down, if they do open up, people are going to want to have these really deeply immersive and meaningful experiences. And at the same time, like you said, it's going to be really expensive to do some of those things. So can you still give the same type of experience with that without having to spend like $6,000 and make it be like maybe a few $100s that you have all the other, $2,000 for a high-end VR headset, or even $300 with the Oculus Quest and the cloud rendering and everything else, that eventually we'll be able to potentially replicate some of those experiences without having to, have all the infrastructure where it would cost that much money, but that would be more affordable. But that's the type of location-based entertainment arcade things that's more of the enterprise phase that happens before that goes into the mass consumer market.
Right.
So you have to have it. It's at that phase that's really proving out that kind of theme park location-based entertainment site-specific type of experience. And it is expensive. And then if it is successful enough, then the hope would be that there would be more of a virtual version that would be more accessible for more people down the road. That would be at a way that could scale it up so that, it's able to reach more people through the virtual representation of that.
And this is where we would tie in the blockchain and cryptocurrency and all of that stuff too, right? Because people want to take home experiences with them. Ooh. And those will be NFTs.
Well, the NFT could give you access to experiences, or the NFT could be a badge that you were.
It could be the ornament. Badge. It's the souvenir.
There is things that there's resale value. And, for me, the interesting thing about that type of Web3 is co-ownership and what's it mean to have people own it and really share ownership, and really seeing if they have a decentralized autonomous organization, meaning that there's a collective of people that are helping drive it. Most of the times with intellectual property like that, they're kind of shut down the ability for you to really fully own or really have full control over it. And so it'll probably not likely come from, like, the biggest innovation is not going to come from Disney when it comes to like surrendering.
Right. They're not going to sell you Moana.
Right. Right. So
I got to give you a piece.
Yeah. There's parts where I'm highly skeptical about some of the kind of multi-level marketing, grifter, scamming dynamics that are in the NFTs. But I do think that in the long term, what's it mean to move ownership away from just having most of the value going to one company and to most of the value being generated by the network of people that are co-owning it in some ways. And, how do you organize and drive that? And how do you have authored control of, like, an artist creating the art that's creating the value, but how do you have the co-creation of that value that's being generated by that community, and really tapping into the network effects of that? And I think that's, we're still the early phases of kind of in the toy phase where a lot of these things are toys. They're not really, bringing value that is translating over into lots of different wide spectrum of domains that make sense yet. That's just kind of like these humorphic metaphors of talking about like these digital goods that you're owning or this digital land. But I think it's eventually going to evolve to a point that maybe is more native to this virtual medium. So yeah, we'll see. I expect that there'll be some hybrid of the centralized approach and the decentralized approach. And somehow will be a conversion, or maybe, just like there was AOL CompuServe and then the decentralized web and HTML, and that for a long time AOL and CompuServe was a better experience. But eventually the web was a better experience because there was more links.
CompuServe, I spent so much money on that one.
But eventually with Metcalfe's law, the network becomes more valuable once there's enough portals or links or people that are on that network, either creating websites or sending you to stuff that is not in those more closed wall gardens.
Right.
So most of the innovation that's starting in the closed wall gardens, and we'll take the design principles and the metaphor and start to apply it to the more open metaverse and the open web, just like there was AOL and CompuServe. And just like right now there's Fortnite and Roblox and Rec Room and VR chat and, whatever Meta is doing. A lot of those different things are kind of pushing the edge of the bleeding edge of innovation of identity expression and virtual worlds and these immersive experiences. And eventually that'll be all ported into these open standards and open XR and the open metaverse in more of a decentralized way that, is really, that's a dream, at least, is that we move away from just having 5 tech corporations control all of our lives, and we have it more of a co-owned, co-driven by the entire community. So that's kind of the dream and the vision. So we'll see if that level of idealism, if we'll be able to close the gap between all the different technological hurdles and the smoothing out of the user interface and everything else, to be able to go from the affordances of the centralized economies of scale into more of the decentralized future that is more equitable. So that's still very speculative, and I personally don't know how it's going to unfold, but that's part of why I'm so interested in tracking it.
Right. Well, if there was nobody talking about it, we have zero hope. So the fact that you're out there talking about it, the fact that you are, moving in this direction and speaking on this subject in a way that talks about ethics, that talks about decentralization and democratization, I think is critical, because if we're not having these conversations, it sure as hell ain't going to happen. So Kent, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge. I could have gone on for 4 hours. Love to have you back sometime. Would you please tell people, if they want to learn more about you, how they can find you and how they can find the Voices of VR podcast?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at @KentBuy, and there you can find a link to voicesofvr.com where you can see the podcast. I'd recommend checking out the episode 1000. It's a 3-hour exploration of like 120 different quotes over the first 7 years of me doing the podcast, and really going back to the early days of the podcast, where you can kind of see what people were thinking about in the early days when it was first, kind of coming about, and people were trying to find their way for what's possible. And also on Patreon, if you want to support the work, I'm on that patreon.com/voicesofvr. And that's how I support and sustain myself to be able to bring this type of coverage. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to just answer any of your questions about the metaverse and just share what I've been seeing as I've been kind of doing deep dives into mostly the VR portions and not as much of the open, decentralized blockchain. But there's a convergence that's happening. So as those convergences are happening, I'm having more and more conversations with people who are at those intersections between the kind of decentralized blockchain and the more VR side. And I'd say that there's still quite a lot of wars that are happening between those two different areas. And I think there's still a lot of things still to be settled out. But if you want to track more information, you can go to my website, voicesofvr.com. Find me on a lot of different podcasting areas. Hope to get on Spotify here soon. Or you can go and find me on Twitter at @KentBuy, where you can see kind of my latest thoughts of what I've been covering in the industry.
Amazing.
Go check him out.
Check it out. This dude knows. This dude knows. Brother, great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Later, brother. Peace. Aaron Desario, the man, the myth, the legend. So many people just all they want to do is just like come out and hang out with you and spark a spliff. Can you tell people where they can find you?
I saw Brooke there in the chat mention that. You know, he's down in San Diego. I'm up here in San Francisco area. We could probably meet up at some point.
Aaron, how can folks find you if they wanna follow?
You can reach me on Twitter. You can reach me in the Discord chat, which I just sent a link in our chat here in this video. Yeah, and if you have any suggestions or things about Google Photos on iOS, let me know. Check it out.
Aaron, thank you so much, brother. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, later. The meat cutter with a $20 dono. Frick, I'm moving and missing the show. I can't wait to catch this podcast. This in podcast form. Peace and love to one and all. I'm Aaron's favorite, by the way. Oh, meat. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. Make sure you check us out you can check out the Unidentified Celebrity View, the Singularity Lab on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. These shows go up virtually right after the live show here. If you haven't, make sure you click the subscribe button. You can check us out on Patreon if you want to support the channels. We appreciate every ounce of support we get. Luis, what's going on tomorrow on the Unidentified Celebrity Review?
Tomorrow we've got Skinwalker Ranch owner Brandon Fugel.
Oh,
yeah. So that'll be fun. We'll be talking about Skinwalker Ranch and some other interests he have. I didn't know that he was a producer of another show, so we're going to talk about that a little bit, which is really cool. He's actually a really good, especially if you like music, if you're a big like audiophile. He helps produce a show that is like one of those kinds of channels, so it's pretty cool.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
All right, well, check us out tomorrow on the Unidentified Celebrity View, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we will catch you guys on the flip side.
Thank you, NeuroStream.
Thanks, NeuroStream, with a $9.99 dono. Late, guys.
Do you want to know about the future? I do, and I know you do too. That's why we do what we do, right here at the Singularity Lab, just for you. Do you want to know about stories about breaking technology? Science? Look right here, I'm looking at my sheet. Marty did it. Why can't you? Remember, this is a public access channel. We rely on your donations, so just hit the Patreon. So we can continue to bring you updated science and technology, breaking news every single day.